Hey everybody, this is going to be a little review video for essay number 1. I'm going to talk about a lot of the common mistakes and errors I saw students making in essay 1. This will help you better understand your grade for essay 1, but more importantly at this point, help you avoid making some of these mistakes for essay 2, which is essentially going to be your final for this class. Now, some of these are going to sound familiar for some of you. If you go back to your copy of Essay 1 and you click on the page, it brings up all the comments that I made for your paper. So I highlighted some of these on your papers, but let's go over more of them generally to help us avoid some of these mistakes for essay number 2. Maybe the biggest issue I saw was simply the need for better editing and proofreading. There's a fair number of freshmen in this class, and some of the things that were acceptable back when you were a high school student are no longer acceptable now on the university level. And a lot of this just requires better editing and more proofreading. You need to move up when you think your deadline is. Your deadline isn't Friday before midnight in reality. It's a few days before that, because you got to finish your paper so that you can then start spending time reading it, editing it, looking for errors, giving it to other people, family members, roommates, friends, bringing the paper to the writing center, sending it to the people at the writing center so that they can review it. Look, the best writers in the world use editors. Newspaper reporters use editors. Editing is the process of writing. And so you need to finish your paper with a sufficient enough amount of time left so you can look it over. So hopefully you can have some other people look it over to catch mistakes and errors. There were lots of mistakes in capitalization, verb-subject disagreement, problems with verb tense, using awkward prepositions that don't fit the context that you're using them in. These are all okay things in rough drafts. For example, capitalization. Lots of capitalization errors. And the problem with that is usually capitalization questions can be resolved in a 5-second Google search. You're not sure if this word should be capitalized or not. Google it, check it, and then you find out immediately. You need to have enough time to check these things. But if you're still working on your paper right to the point of the deadline, you're just banging words out, you're making mistakes, and you're never going to catch those. So better editing, better proofreading. That will improve your grades for many of you. All right. Another big issue, vague claims and the need for greater specificity. One of the big things that separates a C paper from an A paper is specificity, being more specific and backing up the claims that you make. We start out with generalizations. You make an art, such and such was very good. Okay, that's a vague, very general claim. Okay, and that's okay to begin with. But then you got to prove and demonstrate specifically why such and such was good. Give me some specifics. Give me some examples. By the way, examples from your reading material are often the best examples. That really demonstrates mastery of course material. So make sure you're moving beyond just making vague general claims, and you're really getting into the specifics. Be able to point from things from lecture. And by the way, I told you before, you don't have to credit information from the lectures. You don't have to tell me what lecture it came from. You certainly don't have to tell me my name. I know who I am. I told you in the video for the first essay, when I gave you the prompt, you don't need to cite my lectures. I consider, once you watched one of my lectures, I consider that now your material. You know that information, so you don't have to cite the lectures. But you might want to use some of the specific language sometimes. You want to be as specific as you can, and also demonstrate mastery of course material. You've read multiple books about subjects you're writing on here. Be able to bring some of that to bear in your essay. That's what the A students do. That's why the A students get A's. They read those books, they understood those books, and they bring some of that information from those books into their essay to help them get a better grade. C students tend to be more vague, more general. They don't really prove the claims that they're making in their essays. So ask yourself as you're reading, as you're reviewing, when you make a claim in your paper, when you make an argument in your paper, recognize that and step back and ask yourself, have I effectively proven this point before you move on to the next paragraph? Did I show evidence for this? Am I backing this claim up? Have I proved what I am talking about here? If not, if you're just making general, vague assertions, and you never really get to that point of proving it, demonstrating it, you're probably going to need a sentence or two more. Get back into some specifics. Be clear about what you're saying there. And so, greater specificity. Try to be as specific as you can. That really demonstrates you know what you're talking about. If you remain on that vague general level, then as I'm reading your paper, I'm wondering, does this person really know this material? And if I'm wondering that and you don't resolve that issue for me, you're not going to get as many points as another student who starts out with making a vague general claim, but then specifically proves their argument, backs that up with good evidence from lecture material and reading. They're going to get more points. All right. Finally, simplicity and clarity. Your first job as a writer is to be clear, is to help your reader understand what you're talking about. College students, particularly freshman, sophomore, although I see it throughout the grade range at university, sometimes I think get it in their heads that, oh, I'm in university now, so I need to use complicated language, long sentences with complex grammatical structure because that's what we do in university. That's fine. If you know a lot of big fancy words, if you know how to create effective compound sentences filled with semicolons and colons, lots of conjunctions to keep that sentence going, good for you. Awesome. But often what I see are very long run-on sentences from students filled with words that don't mean what this student apparently thinks they mean. Because you're trying to be more complex than you need to be. One of the most common mistakes I saw in essay number 1, and by the way, not just your class, I see that I've been doing this for years. This is a common trait I see in all my classes, is students using words that they don't precisely know the meaning of. They think this word fits the context, but it really doesn't. And they just use the word and it doesn't make sense and it makes the writing unclear. Again, like I was just talking about with capitalization a minute ago, if you want to use a word but you're not sure if it precisely expresses what you're trying to convey, take an extra 20 seconds and look this word up and make sure this word means what you think it means. I see a lot of students using words that are wrong. And by the way, they're big, fancy words that they think they should be using, but they don't know what they mean. And so rather than be using a simpler word that would be much more clear and effective, they use a word that doesn't fit or match. It's sort of like, imagine an Olympic gymnast who is thinking about what the judges want to see. The judges want to see this very complex, difficult, hard to pull off maneuver. But unfortunately, the gymnast doesn't know how to pull that move off. And they decide to do it anyways, knowing full well they have a very low probability of landing that move. They do very poorly in that Olympic event. They would have been better off doing a move that maybe impressed the judges a little bit less, but a move that they could actually pull off and get more points. That's like some of you guys. You're using words, you don't know what they mean, and you're throwing them in here. And I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this sentence is supposed to be, because this word that's so important to understanding this sentence doesn't make any sense in this context. I see these long run-on sentences that are very difficult to follow, that don't make sense. A sentence that should be broken up into at least 2, sometimes 3 sentences, because this sentence just continues to run on. Again, this is where proofreading is really valuable. If you, as the author, are reading one of your sentences and you are running out of breath trying to read your sentence, it probably means it's a run-on sentence that's not very effective. If it's hard for you to read, I guarantee you it's going to be hard for me to read, because I'm not in your head. I don't know what you intended for this sentence to mean. All I know is what is on my screen. And this long run-on sentence filled with words you don't know how to control doesn't make any sense to me. And it's hard for me to give you points if I don't understand what you're trying to convey. So one of the things I would try to really encourage you to do is to focus on simplicity and clarity in your writing. That is first and foremost. Okay? If you know some big fancy 50-cent words, good for you. Use them. I love those words. Okay? But you got to be able to control that language. All right? It better work and fit in for what you're going to try and write. I love long, complex sentences if they make sense, if they are necessary, if they do not turn into run-on sentences that are hard to understand. So, yes, you're in college. Yes, you're in university. Yes, there should be a complexity to what you are trying to write, but that complexity should not come at the cost of clarity. Make sure what you're writing makes sense and is clear. Now, look, there's a flip side to this. And the negative flip side to this is when your writing becomes too informal, and your language is too informal and juvenile. It might be clear, but it's clear writing for a 7th grader. And you should be using language that is more precise and more fitting for the level that we are at, which is university. Okay, so when I say simplicity and clarity, I don't mean juvenile. I don't mean freshman year in high school. But the mistake I see sometimes, and it's the most common mistake I'll see, is students stretching beyond their ability to control words and to control grammar in terms of their writing. And they would be better served when they start to recognize this and say, oh, I don't know if this word means what I think it should mean. Let me look it up in the dictionary. And if they're still not sure, hey, let me try and find a more basic word that will be a bit more precise that I know will work in this context. That's much better. Okay? Or you have a very long, complex sentence and you're not really sure what the rule are for semicolons or colons, or can I connect this with this conjunction? You know what? Let me be safe. Let me just break this up into 2 sentences. I know how to do that. All right? That's a priority. All right? So try to get your writing done as soon as you can and then spend some time editing and proofreading. Make sure you are backing up claims and arguments you are making with specific evidence that you have learned in this class. And then make sure your writing is clear. It is precise. All right. Those are things that will help your grade improve. The A papers that I write, that I read, are the easiest ones to read because everything makes sense. Everything's clear. I get through reading A papers very quickly because stuff makes sense. They're clear. They're proving their argument. They're providing evidence. I'm not wondering if this person knows this material. They are showing me that they know this material. C papers take a lot more time to read because I don't understand what you mean by this word and I'm trying to figure it out. And this is a very long run-on sentence and I got to read that sentence 4 times before I can figure out what you're trying to say. I'm trying to give you points for this. I'm trying to help you out here. And so I'm reading it again and again to try, oh, I think this is what they mean, but you're making me work hard for it. And you're vague and you're not giving me enough specifics. So I'm reading again because maybe you were more specific and maybe I just missed it. And then I read it again. I'm like, no, you're being vague and you didn't back it up, so I can't give you enough points. This will help you if you try to focus on these things: editing, proofreading, making sure you're backing up your arguments with good examples and being specific, and that your writing is clear and precise. You will do well on Essay 2. I will have office hours during week 16 and week 17. Some professors, we don't technically need to have office hours for finals week. I always think that's bizarre because that seems like the time that students need the help the most. So I have my normal office hours. So if you need some help, you want to talk about Essay 2, you're welcome to come in office hours and speak with me. All right, everybody. Good luck. Get working. Finish that early so you got some time to proofread. Take care.